Staying with Attorney General Liz Murrill in her office, set to be in an Orleans Parish courtroom today.
They continue to respond to post-conviction challenges by former NOPD officer Antoinette Frank. Frank is trying to avoid the death sentence handed down after her conviction.
Imagine a restaurant like any other, a family business built on hard work and dreams. Now, imagine a sworn protector, police officer with a badge and a gun walking through its doors, not to protect but to kill. And then, after the bloodshed, imagine her returning in uniform to finish the job. This isn't a twisted movie plot. This is the terrifying reality of Antoinette Frank, a cop who became cold-blooded killer. Her story is a profound betrayal of trust, a deep scar on the reputation of law enforcement, and one of the most chilling sagas in Louisiana's criminal history. In 2025, after decades on death row, her fate hangs precariously in the balance. Will justice finally be served, or will a new twist in the legal system grant her an unexpected reprieve? What truly drives a person to such extremes, to cross every line, to commit the unthinkable?
The unexpected reprieve has arrived. After 30 years, a federal judge officially accepted her appeal and scheduled a new sentencing hearing for December 2025. To truly understand how this unprecedented legal opportunity came about, and to see the horrific murders that put her on death row in the first place, we must first trace the shocking red flags the New Orleans Police Department ignored when they hired her.
In the early 1990s, New Orleans was a city in flux. The New Orleans Police Department, or NOPD, was under immense pressure, battling systemic corruption, racial tensions, and a dwindling force. They were bleeding officers faster than they could replace them, leading to desperate hiring measures. It was into this crucible that Antoinette Frank stepped in early 1993. Young, outwardly driven, and a top graduate of her academy class, she seemed on the surface a symbol of progress, a fresh face for a department in crisis. She was assigned to District 5, covering New Orleans East, a sprawling, diverse area that presented its own unique challenges. But beneath that promising exterior were glaring, ignored red flags. Frank had failed 2 separate psychiatric evaluations during the rigorous hiring process. One doctor, Philip Scurria, explicitly warned the department not to hire her, citing her dishonesty on the application and a severe lack of emotional resilience and confidence under pressure. He wrote that she lacked the basic emotional resilience, decisiveness, and confidence under pressure to effectively perform the duties of a police officer. His report detailed a troubled background, including significant personal instability. The message was clear. This individual was a risk. Yet, in their desperate need for numbers, the NOPD ignored these critical warnings. On February 7, 1993, Antoinette Frank was controversially sworn in as an officer of the law. From day one, her behavior was off. Fellow officers described her as shy, detached, and socially awkward, traits that don't typically lend themselves to effective policing. But there was something deeper, a coldness, a vacancy in her eyes that was hard to pinpoint. One colleague later admitted, she didn't know how to be a cop, not really. She wasn't cut out for it. It was like she was playing a role. Supervisors suggested remedial training, provided extra oversight, hoping to mold her into a competent officer. She even received community service awards, though some speculated these were more about public relations for a struggling department than genuine merit. No one, however, could have predicted the catastrophic betrayal that was coming. When you hear stories of ignored red flags in hiring, does it make you question the integrity of the institution or the desperation of the times? Let us know in the comments. November 25, 1994. This date marked the true beginning of Antoinette Frank's descent into depravity. While on duty, Officer Frank responded to a shooting victim bleeding in the street. His name was Rogers Lacaze, a young, smooth-talking drug dealer with a lengthy rap sheet and a history of violence. Most officers would have seen a suspect, an individual to be processed. Antoinette Frank saw something else entirely. Some say she was mesmerized by his dangerous charm. Others that she genuinely believed she could save him, a twisted manifestation of her suppressed nurturing instincts. Whatever the true psychological mechanism, that night began a relationship that would rapidly spiral into chaos and corruption, intertwining their fates in a horrifying dance of criminality. Initially, Frank spun a fabricated story to her colleagues. She was simply trying to help Lacaze turn his life around. But soon, the lines blurred to the point of erasure. Lacaze was seen driving her personal car, an audacious display of disregard for her position. Worse, and far more shocking, he was spotted inside her squad car at a crime scene, a blatant violation of protocol and trust. She introduced him variously as her trainee, her nephew, or simply waved off questions with a dismissive hand, attempting to shield their increasingly illicit connection. But behind closed doors, things had turned profoundly intimate and profoundly criminal. Frank and Lacaze were lovers, entangled in a secret romance that had disaster written all over it. Her badge, once a symbol of authority, was becoming a tool for his illicit activities. Frank ignored every risk: her career, her badge, the safety of her fellow officers, and the law itself. She knew exactly who Lacaze was, a known drug dealer, a violent offender who had been involved in shootings before, but she didn't care. In fact, their relationship swiftly mutated from romance into a full-fledged criminal partnership. Witnesses later testified that the two began robbing people together. Frank, in her full uniform, would pull over motorists, using her undeniable authority, her badge, to steal money and valuables. The protector had become a brazen predator, actively engaged in shakedowns, her uniform a costume for crime. Then came a critical incident in February 1995, just a month before the horrific triple murders, a final ignored warning that screamed of the danger Frank posed. According to later testimony, Frank and Lacaze allegedly pulled over two men after a party. During a violent altercation, Lacaze produced a Tech-9 assault pistol, a dangerous semi-automatic weapon. One of the men attempted to flee. A civil sheriff, by sheer chance, happened upon the chaotic scene. What he witnessed was deeply disturbing. Frank, in full uniform, observing as Lacaze brandished the weapon. But instead of apprehending the criminal, Frank intervened, not against Lacaze, but for him. She vouched for him, stating, "Lacaze is the good guy." A uniformed officer defending a known criminal brandishing an assault weapon in the middle of a street crime. The incident was never formally investigated. No charges, no reprimand, nothing. And tragically, less than a month later, 3 innocent people would be dead. March the 4th, 1995. It was a place Antoinette Frank knew well. She often worked off-duty security at Kim An, a quiet Vietnamese restaurant in New Orleans East, located at 3125 Elysian Fields Avenue. The Vu family, hard-working, tight-knit, and pillars of their community, had come to trust her implicitly. They gave her a key to the establishment, considering her part of their inner circle, a protector. They were tragically fatally wrong. Frank entered using her stolen key. She moved with shocking speed, pushing Xiao, her brother Kwok, and another worker into the kitchen. Officer Ronald A. Williams II, Frank's unsuspecting colleague and fellow security guard that night, watched the scene unfold with growing alarm and tried to follow them. But before he could react, Lacaze emerged from behind Williams, a predatory shadow, and fired a bullet into his neck. Officer Williams dropped instantly, paralyzed. A second shot, then a third. He was executed point blank, his life extinguished by the very people he trusted, the people he was there to protect. Frank, showing no emotion, turned back toward the dining area. The massacre had only just begun. In the chaos, Xiao and Kwok, stunned and terrified, dragged the other worker into the back cooler, shutting off the light, hiding in the freezing darkness. From their makeshift prison, they listened. What they heard next was pure horror. Frank and Lacaze were yelling at the Vu siblings, Ha and Kwang, demanding to know where the money was hidden. Neither knew that Xiao had hidden it. Frank, in a fit of rage, pistol-whipped Kwang, her patience for their ignorance running out. Still no answer. She then opened the microwave, discovered the hidden cash, and then, with chilling premeditation and showing no hesitation, she executed 24-year-old Ha Vu with 3 bullets. Kwang, 17, was then shot 6 times. Both died instantly. The protectors had become executioners. After ensuring their victims were dead, Frank and Lacaze left the restaurant, believing they had eliminated all witnesses. But Xiao and Kwok were still alive, trapped in the freezing darkness. They waited, minutes stretching into an eternity. They tried desperately to call 911, but couldn't get a signal from inside the cooler. Eventually, Kwok, mustering immense courage, slipped out and ran to a neighbor's house, making the frantic call. And that's when the nightmare turned surreal, revealing the true depth of Antoinette Frank's depravity. Antoinette Frank was no longer at the scene. She had dropped Lacaze off at his home and disappeared into the night, likely congratulating herself on a clean job. But then she heard it, the 911 call. Officer down at Kim Ann Restaurant, 3125 Elysian Fields, crackling over her portable police radio. The very phrase, "officer down," was meant to galvanize her into action to protect her own. But for Frank, it triggered a different, far more sinister instinct. She didn't run. She didn't hide. Instead, she borrowed a police car, donned her full uniform, pinned on her badge, armed herself, and made her most audacious, most chilling move yet. She returned to the scene, posing as a responding officer. Her cold, calculated goal: to finish the job, to kill the remaining witnesses, eliminate Xiao and Kwok, the last living souls who could expose her. Frank, ever the manipulator, tried to play it off. Her face remained impassive. She claimed she had no idea what was going on, feigning ignorance, even pretending to investigate, acting like just another cop on the chaotic scene. But it was over. The survivors knew exactly what they saw. The mask had slipped, shattered by the raw terror and righteous anger of Xiao Vu. Frank was arrested on the spot. Her badge, a symbol not of protection, but of profound betrayal. Lacaze was picked up hours later, his arrogance leading him to use Officer Williams' stolen credit card minutes after the killings, leaving an undeniable paper trail. The motive? A toxic brew of drug-fueled greed, revenge, and pure, unadulterated chaos. But even as detectives locked up Frank and Lacaze, another grim secret was quietly waiting. literally buried just beneath the surface, a testament to Frank's capacity for calculated evil, long before she joined the NOPD. The sheer audacity of returning to a crime scene in uniform to eliminate the last survivors is a level of cold-blooded betrayal that is difficult to comprehend. If you agree that this act elevates this case to a truly disturbing level, take a moment to hit that like button to support our deep dive into these complex stories. Back in 1993, nearly 2 years before the Kimon murders, Antoinette Frank had filed a missing person report. The missing man? Her estranged father, Adam Frank. She claimed he'd vanished without a trace after staying at her home for a short period. The case never made headlines, no extensive searches, no follow-ups, just another lost person in a chaotic city. But the real horror emerged after she was already sitting on death row. In November 1995, a month after Frank was sentenced to die, a neighbor's dog began scratching obsessively beneath her old house. Police investigated and found a human skull with a bullet hole in the back. It had been buried in the dirt, literally beneath her foundation. Investigators strongly suspected the skull belonged to Adam Frank. While DNA testing was never publicly completed, everyone from homicide detectives to prosecutors believed the truth was clear. Antoinette Frank had murdered her own father before she joined the police force, before she killed her fellow officer and the Vu siblings. Why? Here's where things get even darker. Frank confided to psychologists in jailhouse interviews that her father had raped her repeatedly during her childhood. He was abusive, controlling, a monster in his own right. And Frank, they believed, had eventually snapped. She didn't just kill the man who abused her. She buried him right beneath her feet and told no one. The state never even bothered to prosecute her for it. As one officer grimly put it, "What's the point? She's already on death row." This revelation about her father adds a deeply disturbing layer to Frank's psychological profile. Do you think this history of severe trauma should excuse or at least mitigate a killer's actions? Or is justice simply about the deeds committed, regardless of backstory? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Death wasn't coming for her anytime soon, not yet, because what came next was a legal back and forth that shocked even the most hardened courtroom veterans. The case against Rogers Lacaze moved fast. In July 1995, just 4 months after the murders, Lacaze was found guilty and sentenced to death. His biggest mistake? As mentioned, using Officer Williams's stolen credit card at a gas station minutes after the killings, leaving an undeniable paper trail. But Antoinette Frank's trial? That was something else entirely. Her legal team, appointed by the state, subpoenaed 39 witnesses. How many did they actually call? 0. It was as if her defense team gave up before it even began. The trial lasted a mere week. The evidence was overwhelming. The chilling testimony of survivors Xiao and Quoc Vu, witnesses tying her to the murder weapon, her detailed confession, though later challenged as coerced, was damning. And the jury? They didn't even need a lunch break. 22 minutes. That's all it took to return a guilty verdict on all counts, a New Orleans record for a capital murder case. The next day, they deliberated the sentence. It took just 45 minutes to recommend the death penalty. Even the judge looked stunned by the speed and unanimity. On October 20th, 1995, Antoinette Frank was officially sentenced to die by lethal injection. she was transferred to the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women, where she would remain for decades, the only woman on the state's death row. Homicide detective Eddie Rance, who led the investigation, later summarized his experience with chilling clarity. "She's the coldest person I've ever met, and I've been doing this for 30 years. You'd think the story ends there, with a killer cop justly sentenced. But it didn't. Because in America, death row isn't just a sentence. It's a long, brutal, waiting game of appeals and legal maneuvers." Frank's attorneys launched appeal after appeal, arguing she had been denied funding for expert witnesses and was suffering from PTSD and severe childhood trauma, specifically citing the alleged abuse by her father. Psychiatrists testified that Frank had endured years of profound abuse and neglect, that her mind was fractured and she wasn't inherently evil but tragically broken by her past. They argued her capacity for moral judgment was severely impaired. Other experts disagreed, notably a state psychiatrist who diagnosed her with narcissistic personality disorder with antisocial tendencies, traits common in sociopaths. In his opinion, Frank wasn't a traumatized victim who snapped. She was a cold-blooded manipulator, perfectly capable of understanding her actions. Despite these profound arguments, her execution was delayed multiple times. Death warrants were signed and revoked. Judges were recused, and questions about forged signatures and shady courtroom practices continued to surface, creating a tangled web of legal complexities. And then came the twist: politics. In 2023, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards, a staunch opponent of the death penalty, advocated for its abolition and signed an executive order allowing death row inmates to seek clemency. Sensing an opportunity, 56 of the 57 inmates on Louisiana's death row, including Frank, petitioned for clemency. The state parole board, however, wasn't interested. They rejected every single one. Antoinette Frank's clemency plea was denied in October 2023, seemingly closing that chapter. But just when it seemed all hope had vanished, everything changed again. In 2025, Louisiana introduced a new execution method, nitrogen hypoxia. In March, they carried out their first execution in 15 years using this new method. But Frank wasn't on the list. She still had one final card to play. On April 28, 2025, her lawyers filed a new motion, a habeas corpus petition, arguing her sentence was unconstitutional, citing her mental health and trauma history. And this time, a federal judge listened. On May 15, 2025, a judge officially accepted her appeal and scheduled a new sentencing hearing for December 2025, throwing her case back into the judicial spotlight. For the first time in 30 years, Antoinette Frank has a real chance to escape execution. The state attorney general tried to intervene, but the federal judge stood firm. Meanwhile, her partner in crime, Rogers Lacaze, remains on death row, continuing his own appeals. His most recent appeal in 2022 was also denied. So now, the woman who wore a badge, took innocent lives, buried secrets under her house, and became Louisiana's most infamous female killer may never be executed at all. The outcome of her December 2025 hearing will determine if justice, in the eyes of the law, will truly be delivered. Antoinette Frank's story is more than just murder. It's about the failure of systems, policing, justice, mental health, and the catastrophic breach of trust. It's about how a city, in its desperation, ignored glaring red flags, and how the line between protector and predator was crossed in the most brutal way imaginable. What do you think? Should her death sentence be overturned given these new legal developments and the arguments of her severe trauma, or is justice long overdue for the victims and the shattered faith in law enforcement? Drop your opinion in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to The Executioner's Pen for more chilling stories that delve into the dark corners of justice. This case isn't just unforgettable, it's a stark reminder of just how thin the line between law and lawlessness can be. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and never stop questioning.